Today I'm going to show you how you can use Pentaho to analyze some financial information. In this example here, I'm just going to go ahead and log in. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at data that revolves around investing. So for example, in this particular scenario, you have a financial company that distributes analyst reports via their brokers and different other methods as well, um, to generate new investments into those stocks. So the whole purpose behind this is to be able to answer a few questions, right? Some of those questions have to do with, which brokers bring in the most new capital, which brokers work with the most existing capital, which brokers have the most customers, which brokers leverage the research reports the best, and which method do investors usually respond to well in terms of how they receive those reports. So let's take a look at the model first, and then I'll show you some pre-built reports that I did. So we're going to select our research report performance model, and let's just review the model here quickly. We have some detailed information all the way to the account ID for each investor. We're looking at we can look at the analysts, with the analysts that wrote that report, see which are the best performing analysts. So who does the better job at researching stocks? Brokers, capital origination. Capital origination has to do with whether it's existing capital, meaning somebody's making that purchase based on money that's already in their investment account, or is it new capital? Are they making a deposit into their investment account in order to purchase that stock, right? Um, we have access to the date of the transactions, also day of week. So for example, here I'll just drag day of week over, and we'll look at the number of transactions, and we can see really quickly what day of the week people are usually purchasing stocks. Um, we could see this by simply doing reading the numbers or doing some conditional styling, or we may put it into a bar chart. Um, Going back to our model here, so we can talk about what information is available to us. We see also we have the investor name, we have the location of the investor, we have delivery method. So for example here, which delivery method results in people putting more money, or actually even making an investment, whether it's existing or new. And it looks like download has the highest, and we could again flip this to a chart. So it looks like download has the highest, email second highest, in person, mail, and others in terms of number of total investment amount. Um, so it makes sense, right? Because when people download it, they're actually seeking it out. So that tells us that those people are more serious. That might help us know we need to put those investment reports in an area that's more accessible for download. Um, Likewise, we could break it down by new capital investments and see what difference that looks like, right? So for example, here let's just look at new capital investment, and we notice that in person actually is a little more than email, right? This makes sense too, because when a broker has that human touch with their investor and physically hands them that research report, most likely they're not just giving them the report, but also talking to them about the report as well. Going back to our model here, we see some of the measures we have: a number of analysts, number of investors, number of research reports, number of transactions, existing capital investment, new capital investment, and total investment amount. We could look at it by different time frames, like a month here. We could look at the name of the investor, look at what sectors are performing the best. So for example, we could look at the sectors, or we want to look at the industries within those sectors. We can do that as well, all the way down to the stock symbol if we wanted to. Likewise, we could, like as I mentioned, look at some time dimensions as well. Let's take a look at some completed reports here. So for example, I have a analysis report that takes a look at the top three sectors. So we want to analyze the top three sectors within our investment accounts, and it looks like it's a finance, healthcare, and technology, and then we have the grand totals. Notice I'm also doing some conditional styling. Um, so we're looking at the number of investors in those sectors and those stocks, number of transactions occurred, how much of that is existing capital, how much of that is new capital, total investment amounts, and the percentage of investment amount. So for example, out of all of the top three stocks, this particular stock, EVBS, it represents 1.21% of our total holdings for the top three. And notice that these stock symbols are hyperlinks. You could link to an external application as well. So for example here, if we want to do some further research on this particular report using third-party information, we can do that as well. Going back to our report, we also have the ability to export this report. And when I export the report, the main thing I want to show you is the last page of the report, which gives us information about the report. So for example, when it was created, the name of the report, where the data came from. Likewise, you'll be able to see what any filters, and the filter here is the top three sectors by total investment amount. Also the fields used. So if I scroll down to the last page here to finish up, you notice here that we see percentage of total is it defines how we're coming up with that total, and that the grand total of all the columns is 100%. Again, gives us transparency into our data, gives us the ability to audit our data as well. Let's take a look at a dashboard and how we can tie all of this information to a dashboard. So for example here, I'm going to go to my research performance data and pull up my dashboard. So let's go ahead and take a look at this dashboard. Now with this dashboard, I have the option of filtering out on the capital type here. If you notice at the top left hand side of your screen, as well as select particular year that I may want to do my research on. So for example here, maybe we only want to analyze new capital coming in. So we can deselect existing, and you notice that my panels update to reflect those changes. So starting at the upper left hand side of your screen, we can see here's a quick pie chart showing, and this highlights some of the different visualizations within Pentaho. This just highlights it and shows you where most of those uh, new capital investments are coming from in terms of how the people are acquiring those research reports. And it looks like here that the majority are downloading it, and then email and in person, again, just like we saw earlier in that example, are the highest, are the next highest, with in person being the second highest. Over here to the right of that, we're just looking at trends in terms of the number of transactions that are occurring. We're looking at by year so that we can compare year to year and see if there are any trends. To the right of that, we are looking at a scatter plot, which allows you to really look for outliers within your data. And any of these you can expand by double clicking on the header. So here we see, and we're doing this by broker, right? We want to see what the top performing brokers are. So for example, this broker here by far has more transactions and more new capital investments than anybody else. So Wendy Rush is doing a great job there. This also lets you be able to compare and contrast brokers to each other, right? So for example, if I'm looking at 2011 and this particular broker here, Melvin Downs, he's got 112 transactions under his belt within 2011 that represent $4.9 million worth of new investment. Um, how does that compare to other folks in 2011? Well, we could see here that that this gentleman here, Iko Jensen, has much less transactions, but his investment amount is much larger at 5.6 million as well. So this allows us to be able to take a look at that. Additionally, we can drill down. So for example, if I want to drill down into Melvin's accounts, I can double click and pull up a broker book account book report that's going against some transactional data, pulling back all of his transactions to take a look at who his customers are, who his investors are, what are they investing in, so on and so forth. And here I can see full detail of that. Going back to my dashboard here, I can double click back on my menu to minimize that and go back to my charting. And now we're going to zoom into the investor location, And we can zoom into particular areas here. So maybe I just want to focus in on these states here, and I can see that I have two different type of measures being represented geographically. I have the total investment amount and the number of investors. The color represents total investment amount. So the more green it is, the higher that amount is. Here we have 219 million in California. Texas has 224 million. So let's look at something that's a little less green, like Illinois. That's 127 million. So if we go to a red one, like for example, Maine only has 1.4 million between two investors. So likewise, we can also drill down into this geographical location. This might be good if you wanted to schedule a road show, and so we might want to target the place that has the most investors. Now the size of the bubble represents the number of investors. The bigger the bubble, the more investors they have. So for example, Ohio has 88 investors and Illinois only has 68, but Illinois actually has more total investment amount. So if we're going after, let's say, quantity of investors, we may want to focus in on Ohio. In this particular example here, I'm going to drill down into California. I simply double click into California and I can see where my investors are scattered. So I know I may want to do a road show, especially right here in San Jose. I have 18 investors there. Again, I can drill down into this particular area to take a closer look. So it looks like I could probably put on a investment roadshow in San Francisco. That looks like I have a lot of investors within this area here that I can attract. Again, let me go back to my dashboard and go to the right and notice we have a heat grid here where we can look and spot for trends within our data. So easily by looking at this, we see that the finance industry has increased quite a bit in activity. So here we're looking at the more green it is, the more investments that are going there. And I can drill down into finance to take a further look into the finance in this sector and go down to industry. Looks like a majority of that is coming from savings institutions and major banks. I could drill down into major banks down to the individual stock level and to see which one of those stocks are performing at its best for our investors in terms of attracting new investors. If you have any questions, please go to www.pentaho.com.